And let me introduce to you the undefeated, undisputed heavyweight degenerate champion of the world. Wow. I mean, I don't know if I
Yeah.
could do the proper introduction for this because this is great. And we've been shooting more blanks than cigar. I've been saying that for a while. It hasn't been the most favorable of results for us here on Bury Your Bookie, which we welcome you to. I'm Jeff DeForrest, and a man, I mean, quickly becoming legend here as he was all over the board last night. It wasn't just like he isolated on this football game and had the side and the over under and a prop bet or two. This guy was betting hockey games. He was betting Korean ping pong. He was betting virtually anything that you could have action on, which now is virtually anything. And sure enough, goes 4-0 on the program yesterday. Way to start out the week, Mr. Mike Jones.
Yeah.
How are you, my friend? I mean,
Yeah.
you were so hot, you might have even hit an NBA.
The old blind squirrel. You're happy to get up this morning. It's
Yeah.
it gets a nut. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. This racket that we're pursuing, and you get a rare, decent game, and you could, like always, if you want to bet too much, you could make it 5-0 by playing the middle over 20 second half when you have the under 41.5, which is what I said yesterday. I really liked, and you get lucky with an interception to pull the middle. You hit it was 10-6 at halftime. You bet over 20 second half. A little bit of a low number, I thought. And the offenses were moving the ball. The turnovers always kind of stop. I think when you see those big turnovers and possessions, you always got to figure that slows down. So the strategy is, are they moving the ball consistently up and down the field? And you felt like both teams were having, plays a little bit that they could make. But the defense showed a 41, half, and then Jalen Hurts throws a horrible pick at the end, which the kid made some play. Hart made some play on it to reach back and see it. And these guys are players. I was looking at what I saw, watching the Eagles last night, and the Eagles are fascinating to watch them as my main division opponent. That when their offensive line is right, and Lane Johnson's been out, Jurgens is nicked up, Dickerson's nicked up, they're clearly the best team in football, and I think it helps Hurts to function differently because he's got the running game along with what he can do. Play action works. He can get under center. But when it's not blocking and you can't get Barkley going, you're forced to throw. Hurts is just not that quarterback that doesn't needs balance in his offensive play calling and everything. So I could see the emotion after Barkley broke off that long run, which he hasn't done much this year. The offensive coordinator and Barkley jumped together in celebration just because the coordinator feels like, hey, he finally called the right play. Just different way of acting, but for a team that's won the Super Bowl, has been there, 2 Super Bowl appearances in the last 3, the Phillies got issues. And that 23-year streak of non-repeating division champions, which looked like was pretty obvious a couple of weeks ago, could be in doubt if Dallas can get on a run here, to take over the NFC East.
Very soft schedule. I think without the running game and their overwhelming offensive line intact, Jalen Hurts is kind of like Charlie Batch back there, where you have to rely on him. Maybe not the worst of options, but certainly not one that you're thinking, we're talking Super Bowl. So that was a tough beat all the way around, and it looks like Philadelphia's going to pull it out of their ass at the end there and reward their backers who were laying 2 points with a game-winning touchdown. It's always interesting, the debate about whether you'd want the ball first or second in overtime when you win the coin toss, and teams are deferring now and taking it last. And it makes some sense because you're thinking, in all likelihood, if the other team scores on its possession, there's only going to be about 5 minutes left in the overtime anyway, so time for 2 possessions. And at least then you're going for all 4th downs, depending on what it is that you need, unless they fail to score, in which case all you need is a field goal. So there are a lot of advantages to it, but if both teams go 3 and out real quickly, the other team all of a sudden has an extra possession where they're in sudden death. So strange rule, but you thought, okay, you're in there with a shot. And then this Dicker, the kicker, my God, he's got a 94% success ratio for his career kicking field goals. And, I mean, you talk about reveling in the moment there and relishing the moment. Didn't it seem like, I mean, there was no way this guy was going to miss that 54-yarder.
You just, but he didn't make it by much. These guys are making 54 yards. I saw the one of my fascinating kicks was that kid from New Orleans. Yeah, the kid from New Orleans hit the top of the net from 56 against Miami 2 weeks ago, and then can't make a kick last week in Tampa. Fascinating to watch how these kickers are kicking the ball. And I know there's kicking balls out there that probably have different launch codes or whatever.
They have to have helium in these
Yeah,
balls.
yeah. I mean,
The way
it's
we're
just the way
flying,
these
it's
guys are kicking. And, the one thing about kickers, and I can tell you from my experience with the Giants, they're a different breed. Ali
Yep.
Haji Sheik was a Giant kicker in '83, hit 35 of 41, set records in percentage, most field goals made, NFL records. The next year was 17 of 33. So they are those head cases that get in kickers. But, he had broke a Giant record at that time, 56-yard field goal, and I thought he had some leg. But today's guys, all they do is sit and work out. Steve Weatherford, the punter. I heard stories about him from some guys in New Jersey when I was up there that he just could do any kind of workout possible. Was doing workouts with anybody, triathlete, to do everything, and he was averaging 50 yards a punt for the Giants. And you just wondered, where do these guys get this strength from? But the kickers, they don't have to go to meetings; they just sit and work out. And now instead of just kicking and lounging around like the old Dave Jennings and Haji Sheik did, these guys are probably working on their bodies 5 8 hours a day, and they're getting leg explosions, all these different exercises. And that's what makes them so good. So you get the ball, in with these different workouts. Even looking at Nick Folk, I didn't miss one kick this whole year from the Jets. He's 40
Yeah,
years old or something like that. I
100
think
years
the
old.
story I heard from the Jets when they won the game against Atlanta last week was that Folk and Aaron Glenn were teammates in Dallas, which I
Wow.
found fascinating to hear. Like, that's how old Nick Folk and how far they go back. So it's interesting.
Stenerud, Nick
Yeah,
Folk. Unbelievable. But kickers, goaltenders, and you would have to say knuckleballers all fall into the category of being certifiably strange. This is probably, I would venture to say, the only video stream, podcast, blog, whatever, on any platform around the world that will have an Ali Haji Sheik reference today. I'm going to imagine that also to be true, Mr.
okay.
White. All right.
So, so, we, so
So
we, we
you're basking in the
yeah,
glory of this 4-0 last night, which you deserve to be applauded for that. Fantastic. Anybody that was following the show that thought we were crazy, all of a sudden we're back on track. And you had the football game pegged. And look, it was a 2-point line in favor of Philadelphia. Herbert's status probably had something to do with that. This guy literally was Jerry Quarry in there last night. I mean, I've never been more impressed with a guy who went 12 for 26 for like 120, like a buck and a quarter in terms of yardage than I was this guy. I mean, he was literally getting plowed into the dirt, bulldozed on many occasions. He squirmed his way out of some very intense pressure that he was getting, ran as if he was fine with a broken hand, and made some really big plays. I know he turned the ball over a couple of times, but uncharacteristic of Hurts. Speaking of Charlie Batch, I don't even know if Charlie Batch ever threw 4 picks in a game. Only had 2 coming in for the season. So
right.
you could use all the pristine logic you want. There are certain things that you're not going to be able to anticipate when trying to. I don't know. You can have all the AI information and mathematics that you like to apply with your
Sure.
analytics and stuff. How do you account for the fact that the guy threw 2 picks through 12 games and then all of a sudden throws 4 and 1? I mean,
I'll tell you something else, and it's a Jim Harbaugh trade, I think, because he creates, he wants offensive line play, wants to run the football, wants toughness. He got behind Herbert right away. But here's what I think really sets the tone for a football team. When your quarterback comes off hand surgery and plays that next Monday night and
yeah,
puts an effort in like that, all it does is rally the entire locker room because your quarterback is basically your leader. And when you're looking at a situation where you have a player like that who's that good, who's hurt, and most guys would walk away.
it looked like he had a prosthetic
Yeah.
hand.
Yep. And all it does is lift the team. So as much as we think, hey, they're banged up and they're not that good and he's not right and the receivers aren't good, you get that momentum and there's all a psychological edge. I always say that there's 2,500 players in this league, Jeff. They're all great players. It's just how do you get to that? The elite players, there's 2 or 3% of them that are just that good and have the mindset. But how do you get to the other 97% and lift them up? And a player like this can lift up a locker room because they're saying, here's our guy. Quarterbacks just get hit. They're not tough enough, but yet here's this guy that is getting it done. And no skirts on in that room. I can tell you that. That's the way I look at it.
No, that was great. And to see this guy get off the canvas, time and again throughout the ball game, and just line right up, and very humble after the game as well. I think he put the final dagger in any debate that there ever was, having gone sixth in the draft the year he came out. I guess it's what, 5 years ago now. After Tua Tagovailoa was taken number 5, a guy that some thought would be the number 1 overall pick at one point in time, and then I mean, if you look at the two guys, that was always debated. It always seemed like Herbert was much more the prototype.
Mm-hmm.
And to watch the way that this guy responded to immense Philadelphia, I mean, it just put immense pressure on this guy. And look, some borderline stuff where he's already released the ball and he gets a helmet to the chest and is literally pile drived under the ground. Probably put an end to that debate. I'm thinking if I'm picking sides, I'm taking Herbert over to anything.
Let me say that we were taught down here, if I remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Tank for Tua was the topic on the radio.
He was going to be number 1.
They should just tank and get Tua. Well, when you looked at Justin Herbert, you came off of Marcus Mariota, Oregon quarterback, who got blown up against Florida State in a play, and he came out as a second pick of the draft, and he ended up being an okay player. So I think you had that Oregon reputation that maybe Herbert wasn't that because Mariota wasn't. And I think when you looked at it, he was a better thrower of the football, could zip it a little bit more. There was just a little athletic. Mariota a little more athletic, but he could still move around. And I just think they probably looked at what was happening with Mariota to maybe have him fall a couple spots in the draft. But coming out, I thought he was one of the better players and quarterbacks. And the other thing is, you didn't see Oregon all that much on the East Coast. So that's probably what left them to go to the Chargers. They had probably a better look because they saw him at times and maybe dug deeper into him. But I think he's in the top 5 players in the league when he's right. I mean, he'll have to live with that 27-0 debacle in Jacksonville in his playoff appearance a couple of years back. But if he can get over the hump and win a couple of games, and I think they'll eventually figure it out at Chargers. They got a good offensive line when healthy. They lost Rashawn Slater after they paid him like 3 days after they gave him $100 million. Joe Alt, the other tackles out. They're playing without their 2 starting tackles and getting it done winning 10 games. It's more than my team can say.
Yeah, he really impressed me last night with his resilience in that ballgame. And like you said, from the toughness factor, I mean, you always love it. Guy has surgery. Yeah. I mean, it was like Ronnie Lott. Just cut the finger off. I got to get back out there. Unbelievable stuff. All right, we were debating this a little bit because I love it that Notre Dame is crying. And also that the AD's name is Bavacqua because I keep hearing that dripping sarcasm from the great Tommy Lasorda, the late great Tommy Lasorda, in the Kurt Bavacqua rant. And I don't know that I've ever heard a better and more graphic illustration of dripping sarcasm than if you listen to this rant, the way Lasorda would constantly say throughout, Bavacqua, as if, he just found out that his wife had poisoned him there after all those years of harmonious bliss that they had together. This guy's crying all over the place that Notre Dame got hosed and they got their back turned on by the ACC. And you guys are going to have to pay a price now because we're partners in 34 other sports, but we don't want you sharing our football money, that kind of thing. And I love it. I think as much as I delighted in the fact that I was the one guy that was screaming at the movie screen when Rudy was offside, said he's offside, throw the flag. And as much as I loved Jerry Faust when you saw his poor face on the sideline, seemed like a decent enough guy, but when Jimmy was pouring it on there and Parsegian was puking in the booth, I mean, many reasons to despise Notre Dame if you were a Miami fan. But to see them crying now about how they got jilted, I think is better than if they had made it into the field. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Are you a Notre Dame guy?
I grew up a Notre Dame guy living down here. It's hard to be, all in Notre Dame. Many friends that went there, family members that went there. So, yeah, there's something that said it. But, again, I put out my proposal on Instagram, Big Gunner 84 on Instagram. I think they just got to extend the playoff and let the championship games mean what they can and play them in a different week. This week should be championship week. Give the teams 2 byes and play a play-in week with the other 5 teams that are going to get in and play a 10-game playoff. You have 18 teams in. No one can say anything. They're playing in. And if you're 19th or 20th, you probably are not going to win a national championship anyway. But Notre Dame was pretty hot down the stretch. I thought they were getting in. I thought Alabama was a team that was going to be out. But my sources said, and I got to keep them nameless, just unnamed sources said that someone made a phone call to the committee, and it was kind of talked about on Sunday. And when he said, "Hey, we answered all of Nick Saban's questions," when the chairman came on and told ESPN, So I have a feeling an old guy on game day might have made a call and said, "You better put Alabama in," and here's why.
Where else? Yeah.
That's my call, and I'm sticking to it. That someone pushed the button the last minute because I think they were going to have them out. Look, yeah, Jeff, you had to have the ACC represented. So if Notre Dame wants to go to the ACC and 34 other sports and not join them in football because they're greedy and want the money, maybe the ACC's taking a stance on them and say, "Come on in." Does Notre
Greedy
Dame lift it?
pigs.
Hey,
Notre
if Notre Dame wants to be a part of this, lift and go to the Big Ten. Now you read this morning, if they're in the top 12, they get an automatic bid after 2 years of the tournament. Maybe they did it that way and saying, okay, from now on, they're going to get their way. So maybe we're not going to give them their way this year. They lost to Miami head to head. I can see all the scenarios. But the bottom line is they should be in over James Madison. Whoever created said that 5 conference champions have to get in is ridiculous. It should have been the 4 Power Fours, and if not one, get in. And they should have reset it that way and go to the best team available. It's silly.
Yeah.
And they and that's the whole thing. So you come up with a scenario where you want the championship games to mean something, because I talk to people who are close, who've been in these meetings, in these conference meetings, and they'd want that money. It's all about greed. So if we're going to get to that point, you got to make them worth it. Then both teams in the top 12, if BYU is ranked in the top 12 going into that game, they deserve to get in, and then the game shouldn't hurt them. That's all it is. And then make the other teams play a 13th game too. So everybody's played those 13 games that get in, who risk the injury and have all the problems. I mean, so this is easy solution I think that I came up with, but of course no one will ever listen
No,
to it.
no,
But he did go 4-0 last night, so maybe my credibility's rising. Who knows?
it certainly didn't hurt anything to have that take place last night on the show. I love the hypocrisy. I love all of the inconsistencies, the indignities suffered by Notre Dame here, thinking the ACC turned on them, and really the whole lobbying for Alabama. Saban did it before when Florida State, probably the ultimate hose job ever, got left out of the CFP when it was a 4-team deal. And now, I mean, the crying is diminished because it does involve 12 teams, but probably difficult to convince anybody that if you looked at the field, that Notre Dame doesn't belong in there before several others, including, of course, the much lobbied for Alabama. And why is Nick Saban controlling football? He's not even that great on the Aflac commercials. I mean, come on, Deion
Well,
is.
but the story I heard is an interesting one. He's got an office in Alabama. He's got to walk around the campus. If he's the greatest coach ever, he's got to have some pull.
Got a statue. They tore down a statue of a bear as if it was Saddam Hussein, for God's sake.
The logic,
Place.
the conversation I had and the logic I had was just more or less that he's basically has a presence in Alabama, and they want him to pull strings. It's like that politician that leaves Congress and then all of a sudden wants a job in a company, and he's better get things done and lobby to cut back to Congress. So it's kind of like it's just a different position. But to me, if he calls you, you're going to listen to what he says, and that's it. And he probably preached the case for Miami that's saying they'd be the most dangerous team if they got in. He says that on Saturday. So I find myself listening to the guy. I when Bill Belichick, who I respect more than any of these football coaches who I coached with as a young 33-year-old and who I worked with, he obviously the coach, and I know how smart he was then. He says that he learned more football from Nick Saban than any other football coach. That tells me someone of you ought to listen to Nick Saban. So.
Yeah, you got to give it to Saban. As much as I despise Saban for his smarminess, but look at all the coaches that he helped relaunch careers of, including Lane Kiffin, Sarkisian, and most of the people that work for him have gone on and been successful. So, yeah, I mean, he must know something. It's still despicable that he can make a phone call and all of a sudden.
I mean, look, did it happen? I don't know, but that's what
you would have to think. I would probably be more.
You might believe that. In other words,
yes, on that. All right. So the question is, Mike Jones, and never mind all of this. We don't care about Notre Dame. You know what? Screw them. And happy to see them crying. Nick Saban, overwhelmingly influential. If Alabama's only in there because of his telephone call, which you would have to say. Criteria: BYU loses a championship game in convincing fashion. Boom, they're gone. Alabama loses like it doesn't belong anywhere near the thing. I mean, we're not even talking about. We are talking about one of the teams with a bye, but and Georgia right now, I don't know. Maybe I'm dreaming this, and I think the odds were higher, a little bit higher, obviously before this Big Ten, SEC title game, but they're plus 550. Now, I'm looking at Ohio State. Ryan Day factor may be right up there with the Cristobal factor in terms of finding a way to fuck up a game that you otherwise should win easily. They should beat the crap out of Indiana, and then they can't score a point in the second half of the ball game. They lose 13-10. Incredible. So he seems destined to screw something up along the way. Kirby Smart, though, man, he finds literally the cliche applies. Somehow they find ways to win, even when they don't. They appear not to be as good to most
Right.
people as they've been the last couple of years. Plus 550, is that attractive to you at all? Or are there any long shots in the field that Mike Jones has a big ring around, Mr. 4-0 from yesterday, and is thinking, okay, this is where my money's going?
Okay, so we eliminate James Madison Tulane right off the top. So I'm going to look for the double digit team. Oklahoma 50-1, A&M 12-1, Ole Miss 25-1, Miami 16-1, and Alabama 18-1. So if I'm looking at all those teams, I'm going to take a shot at it with the team that shouldn't be in there. Playing really good football now, probably the hottest team down the stretch. I would look at Miami and say, hey, they shouldn't, but in the ACC stinks. Watch out for Miami. I'll go with Nick Saban's pick and say, I'll take a crack at 16-1 and think that if Beck stays solid, their defense is good enough. You know, you got the Cristobal factor. It probably should be 10-1, but 16-1 with the Cristobal factor.
Yeah,
Say
you
this.
have,
I just don't think Oklahoma, Oklahoma's got to win over Alabama to rematch. I think Alabama win. Even Alabama at 18-1. I just don't know if I trust Caleb DeBoer. So the coaching matters here at this point. Oregon's got a nice shot at 750. I just don't think Georgia can get by Ohio State. But Ohio State, I liked them at 165. Now they're 215 in a favorite. If you're getting plus 215 with Ohio State, they're worth the crack, I think.
oh,
They're
yeah,
still,
yeah, 2-1.
they're the favorite right now. I'm looking at the numbers. They're the favorite. Indiana 250 is a plus, and I don't know how they lose, but I like Texas Tech. I just wish I had a better price at 8-1 because their defense is good enough. I just don't know if the quarterback could withstand if they'll be able to move the ball against these SEC teams in Ohio State, but the defense is all that, I think. So, it's going to come down to these low-scoring games. And you have to look at this. You had one of these conference games go to overtime, but all three of those games went under. So the defense seems to be playing to matter now. So you got to look at defense. And again, the setback, I think, is Julian's saying, is just watching the way he played. It looked like he started pushing the ball and started doing things a little differently. So that Ohio State dominance that you don't normally see, how will he be the next time he's in a crunch time game having to play? And, so I think it's a little more open than people think, but I do like Ohio State to win. And my long shot would be Miami at 16-1.
All right. Mike handicap in the field. They're looking to get at least a somewhat close to double-digit score there. Although saying 2-1 was not an unattractive price on Ohio State, kind of
Yeah.
interesting. All right. Normally, by the time most gamblers get to Tuesday, they're looking into various prices on the cost of cremation. You, however, Mike Jones, are coming off a 4-0 evening on a Monday night, including two hockey games, for God's sake. So
Mm-hmm.
you're certainly entitled. We've come to the moment of truth here. We want to give some people something that they can embrace on the slate tonight. So, what do you have? Anything that
Yeah,
takes your attention?
let's let her rip. The Golden Knights going to play the Islanders, laying 140. Like the good Knights slightly, not a big like, but I think Islanders playing decent hockey with some injuries, but the Knights a little more talent I think in that game. But here's where we're gonna go. We're gonna go out west. Sabres and the Oilers. Sabres on a back-to-back. Get beat 7-4 in Calgary. Allow the most goals to Calgary. Edmonton playing a lot better. 15 goals in the last two games. Big price to lay, but with a little cushion. We're going to lay Edmonton minus 215 tonight against Buffalo.
Oh,
And the Avalanche are playing Nashville, the best and the worst teams in the conference, laying 220. Avalanche coming off of games in New York, getting that back to Nashville before they head home. Don't know I like it. I would lay the goal and a half with the Colorado Avalanche, so I'm getting a plus price at plus 115. So I'm looking for that empty net goal there to not want to lay the 220 on the road. But Edmonton would be our play of the night.
always psychologically damaging to have to be sweating out that empty netter at the end of the game. Either way, whether you need it or you need it to not happen.
Yeah.
Kind of wild, though, what the human condition can be reduced to. It's very humbling to think you're screaming, shoot the puck. Just put you're able to ticks off some defenseman's skate and goes straight into the net. And you cover the goal and a half that you need there with the
We
Colorado.
had one. We had one in the playoffs last year where the guy shot with like a second to go. I thought I lost, and it
Yeah.
went in with point two, and they end up giving the goal 4-2. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's like the biggest steal of a lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually,
Almost like the Pete Carroll memes that they have photos of him at the window cashing a ticket.
oh, well.
I don't know if you saw it, but it's coming out now. I thought you would if you saw anything online. You know,
I didn't see anything new on that, but it's Mike Tice syndrome. Tice started that tactic of kicking the field goal when you're in a hopeless situation first
yeah,
with no time
they
left.
actually questioned him on it on a press conference that why he did it, and he thought there was 10 seconds left. He thought the penalty should have put more time on the clock.
Yeah,
They didn't realize it was only 5 seconds, so he says, until the kicker was out there, and he said, "Ah, forget it at that point. Just let him kick the field goal." So he said he thought there might be we get lucky, you have a second left, and then we could go do it. But to recover an onside kick takes a second because the
sure.
ball has to go 10
No,
yards.
he was finished. I mean,
Yeah.
strictly a look, it reeked. I mean, the Portnoy's complaint, literally,
Oh,
is,
it's incredible.
somewhat
Yeah.
legitimate. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Michael, you have fun. You got the Big Gunner podcast coming up here in just
Coming
a
up
few
in
minutes.
a few minutes, we're going to talk about Joe Shane. So the report goes now. Very interesting report.
How's he still around? I mean,
Well,
how's
no. Well, here's the report now. It turned out Chris Mara and Steve Tisch are against him being around next year, but John Mara wants to give him the last 4 games, and he's pulling for Shane. So this should be an interesting debate going back to the 1979 debate between Tim and Wellington Mara on who they couldn't decide on who the GM would be. And the commissioner, Pete Rozelle, stepped in and gave us the great George Young Hall of Fame GM. And 20 years of George Young and 2 Super Bowls was the result of that and the turn of the franchise. So we hope this guy, new GM, or if we get one and a new head coach, can turn the franchise. I think we got, as he says, as Joe Shane said, we have pieces, but we got some pretty good players, and we think we have the quarterback situation resolved, and the offensive line has played pretty well this year. So we thought going in with those 2 things, we would be better off, and we're still right now. The New York Giants are on the clock, amazing
yeah?
as it's time. And that would have been a 1,000,000 to 1 bet that I would have made and lost $1,000,000, be broke forever, that we would not be on the clock at the first pick of the draft after our preseason. So there's another loser bet, but it's incredible to see where the situation, the season has played out for the Giants. But yeah, so there's a little bit of a inside controversy at this point. These are just reports again,
Yeah.
believe what you read, but if it
I
is,
don't see how he sustains it. I mean, bold enthusiasm coming from a guy who's, as you said, is sitting on the board at number one. That they have pieces and they have this and they have that. I mean, you're 2-11 is what you have.
yeah,
You got a mess on your hands. It's
yeah.
unfortunate.
If you're a football fan, to want to know what
Best
goes
one
on
I've
inside
seen.
the organization, the hard knocks with the Giants last year kind of explained it, why we struggled after losing Saquon Barkley. But the press conference, a 20-minute listen on YouTube of Joe Shane explaining himself and then be impressed by the New York media, which is not easy, was really an interesting listen because he's defending all of what they did and they're
Yeah.
getting better at the job. And I'm like, well, you're 2-11.
5-25 in their last 30.
Incredible. You know what?
25.
Even worse, 5-25, Jeff.
Yeah.
Right? I'm 11-36 since I started my podcast. Maybe I got to get off the air. Maybe it's my fault.
All right, the Big Gunner podcast coming up 10 o'clock here on NoFilter.net, and that, of course, just stays there into perpetuity, so you can always catch it, and you'll find out what the great Mike Jones is thinking. Mr. 4-0, what he's thinking about Joe Shane somehow keeping his job in spite of what appears to be a miserable failure of a 5-year run. All right, thanks, Mike, as always. Good luck tonight on these plays that you gave out there. Shooting a puck again with Mike Jones on the NHL slate. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll catch you tomorrow, the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.